hear something like this, you feel bad because he accepted accountability for it.
Paul George just got slapped with a 25-game ban for taking a banned substance. But here's what nobody's talking about. Word is the FBI dropped the biggest hammer in NBA history because of Paul George, arresting an active head coach, a current player, and 4 Mafia families in a scandal so deep that officials say it's only the beginning. Paul George's suspension. On January 31st, 2026, the NBA dropped a bombshell that nobody saw coming. Philadelphia 76ers forward Paul George, a 9-time All-Star, one of the most talented two-way players of his generation, a man earning $51.7 million this season alone, was suspended 25 games without pay for violating the terms of the NBA-NBPA anti-drug program. No warning, no build-up, no leaks ahead of time, just a league statement that hit the internet like a freight train and left every basketball fan in the country scrambling for answers. The NBA didn't say what substance was involved. They never do in these situations. The official release was short, cold, and to the point, just a 25-game hammer that would sideline him until March 25th, 2026, leaving him eligible for only the final 10 regular season games, and leaving the Sixers to fend for themselves in the thick of a playoff race. But Paul George himself didn't stay quiet. Within hours, he released a statement to ESPN's Shams Charania that reframed the entire conversation and shifted the narrative in a direction nobody expected.
Paul George also released a statement about it, saying, "Over the past few years, I've discussed the importance of mental health, and in the course of recently seeking treatment for an issue of my own, I made the mistake of taking an improper medication. I take full responsibility for my actions and apologize to the Sixers organization, my teammates, and the Philly fans for my poor decision making during this process. I am focused on using this time to make sure that my mind and body are in the best condition to help the team when I return."
Mental health. That's what George said was behind this. And look, this isn't a man who just started talking about mental health yesterday. This is somebody who has put his name, his reputation, and his money behind the cause for years. Back in 2020, George was one of the first NBA stars to openly discuss his struggles with anxiety during the NBA bubble, when isolation and pressure pushed players to their breaking points. In 2022, he went even further. He partnered with BetterHelp to donate up to $3 million in free therapy services, working alongside athletes like Venus Williams to break the stigma around getting help. He wrote an op-ed in USA Today admitting he used to feel invincible before realizing he needed professional support. So when he says this suspension was tied to mental health treatment, there's a legitimate track record behind those words. This isn't spin. This is a man who has been publicly fighting this fight for half a decade. Now, under the NBA's drug policy, which falls under Article 63 of the Collective Bargaining Agreement, a 25-game suspension typically signals a first-time offense for certain prohibited substances. It's distinct from marijuana, which was fully decriminalized in the 2023 CBA and is no longer even tested for, and it's distinct from repeat violations which escalate dramatically, 55 games for a second offense, and outright lifetime bans for a third. Experts who've studied the program believe the penalty likely involves a prohibited therapeutic medication, possibly something like an antidepressant, anti-anxiety drug, or ADHD medication that contains a banned element, consistent with his mental health narrative. Players can apply for therapeutic use exemptions if they disclose medication in advance to the league. George apparently didn't take that step, and that single administrative failure cost him everything. The financial hit was devastating and immediate. George forfeited roughly $11.7 million, about $469,692 per game, from the second year of his 4-year, $212 million contract with Philadelphia. That's generational money gone in an instant. But here's the twist that nobody expected. That lost salary actually helped the 76ers from a business standpoint. ESPN analyst Bobby Marks pointed out that the suspension provided over $5 million in luxury tax relief, positioning the team just $1.3 million over the tax threshold, potentially giving them room to make strategic moves at the trade deadline without disrupting the roster. The Sixers might actually come out of this in a better financial position than they were in before the suspension was announced. On the court, the impact was real but survivable. The Sixers were 16-11 with George this season and 11-10 without him. That's not a catastrophic gap, but George was averaging 16 points, 5 rebounds, and nearly 4 assists while shooting 38.2% from 3. He was the floor spacer that made the whole offense flow alongside Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. Without him, those driving lanes tighten up and the spacing shrinks. Stephen A. Smith laid out the dilemma perfectly.
If you're a Sixer fan, you've been disappointed. He didn't play too many games last year. Now he's going to miss games, an inordinate amount of games already. This is after having left knee surgery in off-season and missing games at the start of this season.
On First Take, pointing to the pattern of unavailability that has plagued George's entire time in Philadelphia. But even Stephen A. acknowledged there was a potential silver lining buried in all of this: forced rest. If George stays in shape during the suspension, commits to his workouts and conditioning, he comes back healthy and fresh for the final 10 games and the playoffs. And in a wide-open Eastern Conference where nobody has separated themselves from the pack, a fully rested Paul George could be the difference between a first-round exit and a legitimate deep playoff run. Now here's why this matters beyond just basketball. George's suspension happened at the absolute worst possible time for the NBA from an optics standpoint, because just weeks earlier, the league was already drowning in the biggest integrity crisis in modern sports history. An FBI investigation had just blown the doors off a gambling scandal involving an active head coach, a current player, the Italian Mafia, and criminal schemes that defrauded victims of tens of millions of dollars. The FBI sting. On October 23, 2025, the FBI held a press conference in New York City that sent shockwaves across the entire sports world. FBI Director Kash Patel stepped to the podium flanked by prosecutors, NYPD officials, and Homeland Security agents and announced what he called a historic arrest, one that would fundamentally change how people looked at professional basketball.
What you don't know is that this is an illegal gambling operation and sports rigging operation that spanned the course of years. The FBI led a coordinated takedown across 11 states to arrest over 30 individuals today responsible for this case, which is very much ongoing.
Over 30 people arrested in a single coordinated sweep, 11 states from coast to coast, and the names at the center of it all: Chauncey Billups, Hall of Famer, Finals MVP, head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers; Terry Rozier, starting guard for the Miami Heat; and Damon Jones, former NBA player and assistant coach who was allegedly involved in both criminal operations simultaneously. All three of them were taken into custody on the same morning as part of two interconnected federal investigations that prosecutors said represented the most brazen corruption the league had ever seen. The first operation was called Operation Nothing But Bet. This was the insider sports betting scheme, the one that struck at the very heart of what makes competition meaningful. 6 defendants were charged with wire fraud and money laundering for using non-public NBA information to place fraudulent prop bets. We're talking about confidential details on player injuries, lineups, rest decisions, and game plans, information the general public and the sports books didn't have yet, being fed to a network of associates who then bet hundreds of thousands of dollars on unders. They bet that specific players would score fewer points, grab fewer rebounds, and dish out fewer assists than the sports books expected. And they won those bets over and over again, because they already knew what was going to happen before the game even started.
Between December 2022 and March 2024, these defendants perpetrated a scheme to defraud by betting on inside, non-public information about NBA athletes and teams. The non-public information included when specific players would be sitting out future games, or when they would pull themselves out early for purported injuries or illnesses.
Terry Rozier was at the center of this scheme. On March 23, 2023, while playing for the Charlotte Hornets, Rozier allegedly told people close to him that he planned to leave the game early with a supposed injury. His associates, including his childhood friend De Niro Laster, then placed more than $200,000 in wagers on his under statistics before the game even tipped off. Rozier went out there, played about 9 minutes, claimed foot discomfort, and walked off the court. He never returned. Those bets cashed big. And the winnings? According to prosecutors, they were delivered directly to his home, where the group sat down and counted their money together. A doctor who went back and reviewed the actual game footage from that night found absolutely nothing, not a single thing, wrong with Rozier on the court.
Terry Rozier played up until just under 3 minutes to go in the first quarter. Here he is making a drive. No hobbling, no grabbing, nothing that looks to seem odd or out of the unusual. With an injury, he's running up and down the court, seems to be just fine.
No limping, no grabbing his foot, no going to the trainers for evaluation. He just sat on the bench for nearly 5 minutes of real time looking completely comfortable, no urgency, no concern whatsoever about his supposedly injured foot, and then suddenly took his shoe off right before the the quarter ended. The timing was suspicious, to say the least.
We can see him here sitting on the bench after he's come out of the game. This is with about 2:12 left in the first quarter. And you'd think if there was some foot soreness, maybe you'd be seeking medical help. You'd be having your athletic trainers evaluate you, looking at things, rubbing on your foot. Nope, Rozier just sits here seemingly carefree, not making any motion whatsoever towards his foot. Next possession down the court, 1:40 left in the game, still Rozier sitting there comfortably, not making any motion to his supposedly sore and uncomfortable foot.
And as the doctor explained, the terrifying part about all of this, the part that should scare every fan of professional sports, is that medical staff cannot objectively prove a player is faking pain. An MRI can come back completely clean, and a player can still legitimately have discomfort. There are real medical conditions where imaging shows nothing abnormal, but pain is present. So when a player tells the medical staff they're hurt and can't continue, the medical team has absolutely no choice but to take them at their word. That's the protocol, and that's exactly the loophole these schemes were designed to exploit.
A situation like this, where you have an athlete who's telling you that they have pain and they feel like they can't go, the medical staff has no choice but to believe what they're saying and remove them from the game.
Damon Jones was the inside man on the betting side as well. He allegedly leaked confidential information about Lakers stars LeBron James and Anthony Davis, telling associates when those players were going to sit out or play limited minutes before any of that information became public knowledge. In one instance, a $100,000 bet was placed based on information Jones provided about Anthony Davis being limited due to injury. That particular bet actually lost, and the people who placed it turned around and demanded their money back from Jones. But the betting scheme was only half of this nightmare. The second operation, Operation Royal Flush, was even more insane. This one targeted underground, high-stakes poker games rigged with technology straight out of a spy movie. We're talking about altered shuffling machines that could read every single card in the deck and transmit that data wirelessly to an off-site operator in real time. X-ray tables that could see cards while they were still face down on the felt. Special contact lenses and glasses designed to read pre-marked decks that were invisible to the naked eye. Hidden cameras embedded in light fixtures and chip trays, feeding information to algorithms. The level of sophistication was staggering.
The so-called face cards included the defendant Chauncey Billups, who at the time of the scheme was a former NBA player and is currently the head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, and also Damon Jones, a former NBA player and coach. What the victims, the fish, didn't know is that everybody else at the poker game, from the dealer to the players, including the face cards, were in on the scam.
Billups and Jones were the celebrity lures, the face cards who made wealthy victims feel like they were sitting at a legitimate game with NBA legends. The presence of a finals MVP at the table made everything seem real, seem exciting, seem like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Instead, they were getting systematically fleeced by everyone in the room. Total losses exceeded $7 million, with one victim losing $1.8 million in a single session. And backing the entire operation, 4 of the 5 New York Mafia families, the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese crime families. Prosecutors said this kind of 4-family collaboration is extraordinarily rare, an alliance that hasn't been seen at this scale since the formation of the Mafia Commission in the 1930s. Each family reportedly had a role: tech procurement, venue management, strategic coordination, and enforcement. And when victims couldn't pay their debts, the mob handled collections the old-fashioned way, with threats, intimidation, and violence, including gunpoint robbery. 2 full years before any of this became public, poker pro Matt Berkey described the entire Billups poker setup on his podcast, episode 277 of the Only Friends podcast, recorded live on August 21st, 2023.
There was this game, it started in LA and then it came to Vegas for a few days, and it was all built around Chauncey Billups. And I had heard about the game, and the person who told me about it was like, look, I know the game runs. I'm telling you 100% this game is on the up and up.
That clip went mega viral after the arrest. Over 767,000 views on X alone. Berkey's friends had played in those games, lost significant money, and confirmed the cheating was real. But there was no recourse, no way to fight back against someone with that level of fame and power. And during the same press conference where all of this was being laid out for the world, U.S. Attorney Nocella accidentally said something that completely broke the internet.
The indictment details specific examples where the defendants profited from illegal gambling and illegal betting on various NBA games about the performance of players on, among other things, the Charlotte Hornets, the Portland Trail Blazers, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Toronto Rangers.
The Toronto Rangers, not the Raptors, the Rangers. In the middle of the biggest NBA scandal in modern history, this man accidentally created an entirely new, the fallout. So where does everything stand right now? Let's run through every piece of this because the aftermath has been just as chaotic and consequential as the arrests themselves. Nothing about this situation has been simple, and the ripple effects keep spreading. All three NBA figures have pleaded not guilty. Terry Rozier entered his plea on December 8, 2025, and was released on $3 million bond with his Florida home as security. His passport was surrendered, he's banned from gambling, and he can't contact any co-defendants or witnesses. His legal team filed a motion to dismiss in December, arguing that his alleged role was minimal and insufficient to sustain conspiracy charges. Chauncey Billups pleaded not guilty on November 24th, posting a $5 million bond using his Colorado home as collateral, signed by both his wife and daughter. The Blazers suspended him immediately and named assistant Tiago Splitter as interim head coach for the remainder of the season. Billups even sold his Oregon home in December 2025 amid the scandal. Damon Jones pleaded not guilty on November 6th on a $200,000 bond backed by his parents, with the same restrictions on gambling and organized crime contact. If convicted on the dual conspiracy charges, each defendant faces up to 40 years behind bars. Then on February 2nd, 2026, an independent arbitrator dropped a ruling that stunned the entire league and set a precedent that will echo for years. Rozier won his salary dispute with the NBA and Miami Heat. Here's what happened. When Rozier was arrested, the Heat placed him on leave and put his entire $26.6 million salary, the final year of a 4-year, $96.2 million contract, into escrow. That effectively made his leave unpaid. The National Basketball Players Association fought back hard, arguing that under the collective bargaining agreement, unpaid leaves of absence are only permitted for cases involving domestic violence or child abuse, not for federal gambling charges, regardless of how serious they might be. The arbitrator agreed with the union's interpretation. Every single dollar of that $26.6 million was ordered released. That ruling sent a message across the league, because if Rozier gets his full salary while facing federal conspiracy charges and sitting at home not playing a single game, what does that mean for how the NBA handles the next case like this? Billups, by contrast, has no comparable player union protections as a coach and risks losing his entire $7 million salary with no legal path to recover it. The reaction from inside the NBA was raw, emotional, and divided. On Inside the NBA, Charles Barkley was visibly upset and didn't hold anything back.
I know everybody that's at play, and I don't like to sit up here and be hypocritical about certain things. I homeboy gamble, Ernie. Bet it. We've been on teams. We played cards. We played spades. We played talk. But with that being said, every year they would give us forums on what and what not to do. One of those things where if somebody asks you if a certain player is playing, you say no. So all these guys knew what was at stake, and I'm just ashamed that they put themselves and put their family and put the NBA in this position.
Kenny Smith tried to bring nuance into the conversation, pointing out that gambling is an addiction that makes people make illogical decisions regardless of how much money they have or what their background is, but Chuck was having absolutely none of it. He shut that argument down immediately.
Man, this ain't got nothing to do with damn gambling addiction. This ain't got nothing to do with addiction. These dudes are stupid. Why are they stupid? Under no circumstances can you fix basketball games. Under no circumstances. I love to gamble. The notion, Rozier makes $26 million. Him betting, giving people information or taking himself out of games, how much is he gonna benefit taking himself out the game to get unders? He's making $26 million.
Colin Cowherd offered a different lens on his show, providing historical context and reminding everyone that gambling and sports corruption goes all the way back to the Romans and the chariot races. He ticked through the long list of predecessors: Tim Donaghy fixing NBA games as a referee, Henry Hill and the Lucchese family running the Boston College point-shaving scheme in the late 1970s, the ASU investigation, and his own years covering UNLV basketball in Las Vegas, where a notorious game fixer named Richard the Fixer Perry was was found in a hot tub with players. His point was clear: don't get precious about this. It's been happening forever. But also, be grateful when it gets uncovered, because that's how you protect the sport. But even Cowherd admitted he was caught off guard by one particular name.
When I woke up this morning and saw Chauncey Billups' name, I would not have guessed Chauncey Billups. He was always one of the smarter, headier, more professional guys.
Now zoom all the way back out and look at what the NBA is dealing with in totality. Paul George is suspended for a drug violation tied to mental health medication, a personal matter with no connections to anyone else. Terry Rozier is facing federal conspiracy charges for allegedly faking injuries to cash in on prop bets. Chauncey Billups is accused of helping the Mafia cheat wealthy poker players out of millions of dollars. Damon Jones is charged in both schemes simultaneously, and the FBI is standing at the podium telling the entire country that this investigation is very much ongoing and that more could be coming. The next court hearing for all 34 defendants is scheduled for March 4th, 2026, with the judge targeting a full trial start by September. Congressional oversight has already kicked in at the highest levels. The House Energy and Commerce Committee demanded briefings on NBA betting policies, and the Senate Commerce Committee followed up with its own requests. The NBA issued memos to every team in the league on injury reporting protocols and betting safeguards. Commissioner Adam Silver publicly apologized for the scandal's timing and impact, vowing enhanced integrity measures going forward. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.